My my patch is northeast Yorkshire, which includes quite a bit of the industrial part of Teesside. So everywhere south of the River Tees really is my patch, and Teesside has got the accolade, maybe not a very good one, that it's got more brownfield sites than anywhere else in Europe, which I was quite surprised at really. But there are some big ones. I used to take my dog for a runabout on one that is enormous. I worked it out. It was about a square kilometre in size. It was open access, even though the local harbour police don't like you going on it. But there was no fence and there's no sign saying you can't go on it. And that was an amazing sight, really. All sorts of things on there, including some rare butterflies as well. So brownfield sites and waste ground can have an awful lot of things on it. In fact, the diversity of species in what you would call wasteland is often much better than the wider countryside. Because if you've gone and done any botanizing in most fields areas, the diversity level is quite low. Whereas in brownfield sites, because it's uncared for, no herbicides, no pesticides, the plants go crazy. And often, certainly in Teesside, the substrate underneath is often slag from the original ironworks in the 19th century. And it's got quite a lot of calcium in the rock, which tends to produce a calcareous flora. So you get a real mixture of things, really. So, even in the black picture there shows the one of the main roads in the town centre. You've got lots of things along the road edge, really. So anyway, we'll explore a bit more. Show you roughly where I am, really. So this is my patch, Vice County 62. It's quite a big patch, considering we haven't really got that many botanists. So Teesside's up at the top here in the north, and right down at the bottom we've got York, and on the right hand side we've got Scarborough, and on the left hand side we've got Northallerton. So you've got the whole of the North York Moors National Park, and the A and B, the Howard and Hills area at the bottom here. We've got mostly acidic area in the centre where the moors are, but we've got limestone at the south. So we've got a real mixture of things, really. So, it's quite a diverse flora. Plus, we've got quite a lot of urban areas, particularly in the north and the bits in York as well. So it's mostly those that I'm going to talk about, really. The urban fringes, towns, pavements, that sort of thing. So anyway, so you know where I am, basically in the country. So yeah, Teesside's got some interesting plants, really, considering it's a town centre. Ruleaf saxifrage is a beautiful little plant, and it grows right in the middle of Middlesbrough as a roadside weed, which is it's quite, it's a charming little thing, and you wouldn't tend to see that as a weed, but it's definitely there. And we've got another one, that blue fleabane, which tends to like limey soil, again in the centre of the industrial areas. I put some of the maps in to show you roughly the distribution of things. Quite a lot of the plants I'll show later on are quite rare, because that's one of the things I've found with doing urban botany. You never really know what you're coming up against and where you might find things, and strange things turn up all the time. So you can go and survey an area one year and come back, say, a year or two later, and you'll find other things, new things that have come in. So it doesn't stay the same. Okay, so why botanize in urban areas? Because you might think it's a bit boring, and that you uh, being in nice places to botanize is often, it's a nice day out and walk, and by a stream or a river. Whereas you don't tend to think of going down the town to do a bit of botany, but you never know what you might find. As you'll see later, I've found quite a lot of very rare plants in industrial areas, some of which are a bit amazingly weird in the sense of how the heck have they got there? I'll show a couple there that I've no idea how they got there. So, which is a real strange one, really. And you get things moving into an area. I don't know where everybody's based, I presume around the country. But one plant in Teesside in particular that is expanding at an amazing rate is narrow-leaved ragwort, Senecio equidens. And it seems to be more of a winter flower at the moment. It's blooming like mad, and it's spreading everywhere. It tends to be at the moment in industrial areas and urban areas, but it is slowly moving into other parts of the country and into edges of gardens, things like that. So I'm interested to know where people have got that really. So, and like I said earlier, the diversity is much greater than you might expect in, the greater countryside, if you like, with the farmland and so on, tends to be a little bit uniform. Whereas the diversity on brownfield sites, particularly in Teesside, where we've got the calcareous substrate, is quite interesting, really, and amazing stuff really turning up. So and say access to get to these places is a lot easier. So you just have to go for a walk. You can walk, have a walk with my dog and botanize as I'm going along. And one of the things you sometimes find is you find weird things that give you a bit of a botanical challenge, and you find something growing at the side of a road, and you think, what the heck's that? Especially if it isn't in flower, it can be a bit of a challenge really to try and work out what things are. But it certainly keeps me on my toes. So, urban plants, right? Obviously, it's things in an urban built-up area, parks, streets, gardens, that sort of thing, brownfield sites, and it's often where people have left a piece of land and just basically abandoned it. And it's often quite, although they might have to cope with pollution from industrial places, often there's no herbicides, so they don't tend to get knocked back unless they get covered over with the soil and things. But they tend to do quite well and grow quite big as well in some of these places. So there, would you describe them as weeds? Because you can get lots of plants that growing where unfortunately we have this kind of tidy mentality in a lot of towns and villages where everything has to be neat and tidy. And there was a couple of people with urban botany in mind. I think they were younger people. They were going around chalking on the floor and writing down the plants and putting arrows pointing to them. I haven't got round to doing that sort of thing because actually I think it's actually against the law to to chalk on the floor. But it was just an awareness that the plants are there. But unfortunately, people just remove them mostly because they're just thinking they're an eyesore. But generally in the towns, unless they're out with the weed killer, they do manage to come back even after they've been blasted with weed killer. There's still some of them come back. Like in the picture there, sometimes you get the greater quaking grass that turns up, which is often used in flower arranging, and obviously things like shepherd's purse, which is pretty much everywhere, eastern rocket and buckthorn plantain, which tends to be a bit nearer the sea, but we've got it quite a bit in certainly the north of the county. So that's weeds. So what are the habitats that we've got? So We've got gardens, pavements, urban trees, waste ground, brownfield sites, railway banks, road gutters, and curbside. Railway banks often you can't really easily get to, which is a bit of a nuisance at times if you see a good plant. So I tend to use binoculars if I'm doing that and I'm near railway lines. But the rest of it you can usually get to, unless it's a brownfield site with a big fence around it. The big steelworks site on Teesside that was demolished a few years back. I tried to get access to that before they started knocking it down to see what was inside the site because there were quite a lot of rare hawkweeds in there. But and unfortunately, I didn't manage to get in, and they've changed it so much now. So I don't know whether any of them will survive, but they might do. In gardens, one of the plants in particularly in my area that's spreading is a grass called water bent. I don't know if anybody's come across that. I think it looks a little bit like a little Christmas tree, but it seems to like gardens, pavement edges, and it's becoming very widespread and seems to flower most of the year, which is probably why it's spreading quickly. So the other thing that's interesting is the urban trees. I know it's not exactly usually on the radar with trees, but you can find some interesting ones. Just where I live, there are two beautiful, very conical shaped trees, and it took me a while to work out what they were. And they're Jersey elms. And when I tried to find out how common Jersey elm was still, um, somebody told me that there weren't any at all in Jersey. They've all gone. But there's these two huge trees that look pretty healthy, and obviously have managed to survive the Dutch elm beetle. And yeah, amazing. But but you can find all sorts of things. There's some interesting things that they do plant. Um, right, let's have a look at what we've got. So we'll start off with looking at walls. The big hawk's beard, I don't know how common it is in other parts of the country, but it's certainly an industrial weed that we get a lot in Teesside, the north of the county. I don't think it really occurs that much in the wider countryside yet, but it does seem to like dry, stony areas. Um, the plant in the middle is an interesting one that was found on a brownfield site in VC 66 in Durham. And that's a really rare plant in the UK. It's the yellow version of fox and cubs. It's actually a separate species, but for some unknown reason, it's not as widespread as fox and cubs, which tends to be, in a lot of people's gardens and things. I've got a little bit of it in my garden, and it does seem to want to spread. So, it might turn up eventually in other places. But when I looked at the BSBI database for the records for that, it wasn't as widespread as I thought it would be. So maybe 20 records in the country, something like that. It's not a lot. So that was quite a good find. And, you could find all sorts of things on walls. Look at this one. Ferns particularly like to get in the cement of the walls. We have rustyback fern or we did have rustyback fern on a building at Loftus, which is on towards the moors, towards Whitby. And the building it was a Victorian building. It must have been built with lime mortar. And the spores for the fern must have been originally in the mortar because they've been there a very long time. And it's a rare plant on the east side of Britain. It's common on the west, but certainly where we are, it's very rare. But the building was going to be altered, and all the brickwork on the outside of the building was going to be removed and replaced. So we were going to lose this colony of ferns. So we decided to do some drastic action and actually dig them out and then plant them on. And then we had a series of pots of rustyback fern, but then we didn't quite know what to do with them or where to put them. and some have been put in a cemetery in Middlesbrough, and a couple at South Gare, and some of them have died, but some of them are still going. So that was quite good. But yeah, so walls can turn up some interesting things. Black spleenwort is another fern that seems to be spreading, um, and and we've got the dandelion there growing out the wall. It's amazing where the seeds get and how they manage to survive really with very little water. Um, Yeah, this was the one on the left is a building in central Middlesbrough, and a Victorian building, and it looks like the drain pipes leaking at the top. And there were about three species of fern, and there male fern, heartstone fern, and I think common polypody on there as well. I was amazed. It'd obviously been left in. I thought it was really good. But I think the building was semi-derelict, which is probably why it's managed to survive. But then you don't know what you're going to find. That's this form of wood dock with the which is often a garden plant, is often grown, but sometimes escapes. It grows at the side of the wall. So you can find some interesting things. And these two drain pipe or gutters or what you would call them. It's hard to tell from the picture, but there's the one on the left. I counted about 10 different species of plant in that one view, and the one on the right was nearly the same, with heartstone fern growing inside the drain there, and I was quite surprised just how diverse that was in a sort of a meter of curbside, several species of grass and a few ferns. So there's quite a bit and some bit of moss as well. So there was quite a variety there. And because we get in the winter, we do get bad weather and they do spread salt on the roads. One of the plants that's amazingly spread is Danish scurvy grass, which in the spring on roads in Teesside, it covers all the way along the edge. It flowers quite nicely and it is quite obvious, and it has spread along the main roads, the ones that get gritted usually, because the seed must be in the salt and it manages to survive pretty well all the year. In the middle again, there's water bent, which again seems to be able to tolerate salty conditions by the road, and then makes its way into gardens as well. And the picture at the bottom is sea mayweed. I don't know if you can make out from a picture. I don't can see my pointer. There's little oil valves there, which are more elongated because scentless mayweed they're usually round, whereas sea mayweed they're more elongated. So you can tell the difference with that. And on this one, this was the yellow plant is uh, uh, hoary mustard, um, Hirschfeldia incana. But you've got all sorts of orishes down the side here. You've got common orish, probably prostrata along the edge, and you do get other halophytes as well along the edge of the roads. So it's worth having a look at that. You have to make sure you don't get run over in the process, though. Right, so move on to the brownfield sites. Now, say this our my area has got a lot of brownfield sites, and when I was doing a floor of South Gare, I was amazed to find that the railway line from Middlesbrough to Redcar uh, was the sea wall in the early 1800s, and everything to the left, if you were going to Redcar, was salt marsh right across to Hartlepool. But the ironworks in Middlesbrough and Stockton were right in where the town is now, and they wanted to develop the town, but they had great big piles of slag in the middle of the town, and they didn't know what to do with it. So in the end, they put it all in railway wagons and took it down to the what is now South Gare and North Gare to build up the entrance to the River Tees and narrow it so that ships could get down, with coal for the ironworks and so on. But so that all the land from the railway line to where the current river is, it was covered in slag, obviously feet thick of it. But it's got, I think, calcium silicate, a lot of it in, but it's produced a really good calcareous area, which is often quite hard because there's very little actual soil. So it's tough stuff. But a lot of plants who can't cope with competition seem to really love it. So and you can get some really diverse bits, especially if you've got a bit of water as well. So there's some ponds and things like that. So you've got a real mixture of things. South Gary is a typical example of that, although it's not exactly a brownfield site. You could describe it as such because of the input of man well over 120 years ago there. So you've got sort of industrial landscape plus natural things. So you've got a massive mix of plants. So it can be quite good. I mean, South Gare's got like 650 species recorded there. It's like ridiculous, really. Yeah. So, and again, absence of pesticides and herbicides because they just don't bother. The ICI and the big chemical areas that are usually fenced off, they're quite species rich. There was one of the chaps in Billingham who was also into butterflies. He managed to persuade the company to make it their own private nature reserve with a big fence all the way around it. And I've been in there, and he dug ponds and he did everything. It's amazing. Something like 25 species of butterfly, and it was just amazing, really. So yeah. Okay, so brownfield sites, ultimate weedy places, but as then you never know what you get. And because this picture on the left hand side of the pyramidal orchids, you can see that the grasses are quite low. It's not very green, and it's because it's rock hard material with very little soil in it. But it's very much to the liking of orchids. So bee orchid, pyramidal orchid, common spotted orchid, northern marsh orchid. Just love it because there's not much competition, and they just go mad. I mean, this particular brownfield site had thousands of these plants. They're just amazing, really. And say, and when you've got old railway lines like this one here, and in the ballast, we've got different brambles. We've got several species of brambles in the area. One that you tend to get in a bramble that you tend to get in allotments and things like that is one called Himalayan giant, which is a bit of a thug of a plant. It's got great big primer canes, but it's very noticeable. You can actually, once you get your eye in on it, you can actually identify it even if you're driving along because it has white underneath the leaves, and there aren't many brambles that have got white underneath the leaves. So you can pick that up pretty easily, and that tends to like this sort of habitat. And again, because it's left, you get a real flowering of plants. They're not grazed that much here. The one picture on the left with all the bird's foot trefoil it was grazed by rabbits and a few deer. That's a picture actually part of that huge brownfield site I mentioned, which was about a square kilometre, which has got some interesting areas. There's one patch in the middle of it with no grass at all. It's all covered in cladonia lichen. So there must be something under the substrate that's stopping the grass growing. But it's just superb for butterflies. Fantastic. So Things like Viper's bugloss, love it. Again, like stony grounds, seem to love it. Now then, one of the genuses that love brownfield sites are cotoneasters. Now, this site that I mentioned before that I used to take the dog on had 8 different species of cotoneaster on there. Um, they are they're a bit of a challenge to ID. Well, they're not the easiest thing really, but some of them you can do. A couple of common ones is Sternianus in the bottom corner there, and Franchettii are two that are often grown in gardens. And Franchettii is often recorded as such, but it's actually Sternianus because the leaves are bigger, so that you need to sort of measure the leaves to see which one you've got. And this one looks like horizontalis, but it's got almost unpronounceable name. Uh, I actually had to use AI to try and work out how to pronounce that. It's obviously named after somebody called Helmquist, but yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful. And again, some of these are all garden ones that have escaped. Horizontalis is often on a lot of brownfield sites, but you can get other ones. Zoachicus is a hybrid, which is often grown in as hedging in people's gardens. And my guess is it's coming from birds that have eaten the berries. Now, one of the things that fascinates me is why is it that the birds, the blackbirds, the thrushes in the autumn taking the berries and they pass through the bird and they fall everywhere. Why is it that all these cotoneasters are not covering all the hedgerows in the county and elsewhere? And they're not. They don't seem to be able to get going in hedgerows. But on hard ground like brownfield sites, it's obviously their forte there. They like that hard for substrate, which I suppose is a little bit, excuse me, a little bit like their original habitat in the Himalayas, where it'd be in the mountains and it would be rocks and so on. So my guess is that's the reason for that. But yeah, they're definitely an interesting bunch. So if you want to get into cotoneasters, brownfield sites are probably your best bet. And you can get some interesting things turning up, like this Jerusalem artichoke growing, which I think the map's near the top there. So there aren't many spots, certainly in the north of England on it, maybe further south. But again, it tends to be one that's either been dumped from garden or has got in a soil mix that's been dumped somewhere. That's how it usually spreads. But even like normal what you could call a normal wildflower like oxeye daisy and birdfoot trefoil, they often go ballistic when they're on an area like this because there is often very little grazing. There's no sheep, cattle at all. There's only rabbits and a few deer, so there's not much in the way of anything to knock them back, and they often flower in abundance. It's often beautiful, really. Uh, uh, the This bank on the left hand side was covered in corn chamomile, and there was on the other side of the bank is a golf course, and the soil must have come from somewhere, maybe a building area where they were building new houses or something, and they dumped thousands of tons of soil in a long line that was about 400 meters long, and it was amazing to watch what came up with this out of this bare soil as it went through the year. And we had this enormous patch of corn chamomile that was absolutely gorgeous on this bank. There was borage and a few weird things as well, mostly garden things. Um, and then you've got things like again Viper's bugloss gets in the mix, And in Teesside in particular, we've got quite a few hawkweeds. My predecessor was an expert on hawkweed, so I've sort of, if you like, you sling enough mud, some of it sticks. So I know some of them. This one's called salticola, and it has the leaves at the stem tend to twist as they're going up the stem, which makes it more easy to identify. But again, that not so common in the countryside, that one. Right. You when you're looking at plants, sometimes you come across things that are a bit odd or a bit strange. I'm quite into Senecio as a genus at the moment. And I found one the other day near South Gare that turned out to be a VAR version of Oxford ragwort. And Oxford ragwort tends to have quite divided leaves. Well, this one had almost entire leaves, which I'd never seen anything like it, which is why I stopped as I walked past it and thought, oh, that's a bit odd. So you can find all sorts of weird things. Now, I don't know if many of you know about the York groundsel, the story of that. It was found in the 1970s in the centre of York, and it was assessed as actually a new species because it was a hybrid between Oxford ragwort and groundsel. And this has happened twice that it's become a species. There's one in Wales, which is more widespread, but the one in York was really only in the city centre, and the powers that be and the council managed to completely kill it, and it became extinct about 2003. Thankfully, Kew Gardens had taken some seeds, and we tried to regrow some of the seeds about 10 years ago or something like that, but it failed. So they lost all those seeds, and Kew only had a few seeds left. So recently there's a place called the Rare Plant Nursery further south. I think I'm not exactly sure where. I think it's kept a quite a guarded secret where it is because it has a lot of really rare plants in it. And they grew it on, and they managed to get a jam jar full of seed for it from it. And then a couple of years ago, it was reintroduced into York by the river, and mostly in the weedy places where it was originally found. But it's beginning to spread, and it's Yorkshire, one of the few endemic plants in Britain, really, and a new species. And I found out apparently it's only one of six species new to science that have been found either here or in North America in the last 100 years. So it's quite an interesting plant. And but we do also have just to be wary. We have a raid version of groundsel called var hibernica, which looks a bit like the oak groundsel, except that it tends to have more petals, whereas the oak groundsel is 8 or less, whereas the hibernica 10, sometimes 10 or more. So just be aware of that if you're looking for it. But var hibernica isn't that common, but there is some of it in Teesside, dotted about. Yeah, so if you're ever in York, have a walk around Lendal Bridge if you want to see the endemic plant. I say you can find lots of common things and if you're really lucky, you find some rare things. That's that yellow fox and cubs again, which looks almost identical really to the orange one. And the plant itself is very, very similar. But yeah, interesting find that one. Now this one was an amazing find. This was found by Michael Wilcox. I don't know if some of you might know Michael, extremely good botanist, and he found this at Greetham Creek on an old bit of road near a bridge over the creek. And this is blue stem willow, which is an American willow. And I don't know if you can see the map there. There's pretty well just the one dot at Greenfield Creek. I think it was found somewhere else, but somewhere in Scotland, I think, up there. Um, but yeah, but it does have really quite bluey stems. It's quite an interesting plant, but they're just the one plant, so you never know what you're going to find. And this is a very recent find, very near to where I live. Jersey cudweed. This is what a plant that's spreading like mad apparently in the country. That's the current map on the right there, showing it's dotted about quite a lot around the London area. But my guess is it's way out of date, that map. I think it's a lot. It's spread a lot more now. So it's worth looking for that one. Um, yeah, interesting plant. Um, this was another Cotoneaster that was found on that big brownfield site. And this really puzzled me. And I went to the BSBI conference and they were going to do Cotoneasters to look at them. And they suggested people brought some samples, for to ID. So I took this one along and I actually stood up in the meeting and said, I've got this one and I can't do it. I don't know what it is. Can anybody do it? So they all looked at it and nobody put their head above the parapet and could do it. I don't know if you know John Poland. Uh, he couldn't do it either. And he suggested I sent it to Janet Fryer, who was the world authority on Cotoneasters. But in the end, I managed to work out what it was, and it was this one called silver leaf Cotoneaster. And if you can see the map there, it's not surprising nobody knew what it was because there's so few records of it dotted about. But there's a few in the northeast here, and my guess is it's come from bird song. There were two plants on the Brownfield site of this, but it also occurs in Durham inland in a park. But I don't think it was planted. I think it's bird song again. But interesting to know whether that's come from Scandinavia, really, from with thrushes or something like that. And the erodium at the bottom there was a self-sown plant in Saltburn, which was quite an interesting one. Again, not many records of that growing wild in the UK. Yeah, and another interesting one was small flowered buttercup. Again, if you're in the south of England, you're probably more familiar with it. But if you look at the north of England, which is here up here where we are, it's a pretty rare plant, really. And that was in a housing estate in the middle of Middlesbrough. So it's like, how the heck has it got there? Where's it come from? It's strange, really. Whether it's come through from a plant that's been brought in as a pot plant and they're planted in the garden and the seeds have spread. My guess is it's come from something like that. But it tends to it's growing on the edges of gardens, on the garden walls and things. That's where that one's come from. So that was quite a nice find. And this is a really weird one as well. This is ivy broomrape coming up through tarmac. That on the other side of that wooden fence is a house that was completely abandoned for years, like smashed in windows and overgrown garden, and it had a load of ivy on the other side of the fence. And my guess is that somebody's planted the ivy and taken it from somewhere else, probably from the west coast, somewhere around North Wales or somewhere like that, or maybe from the southwest, and brought it over, and it's had the a bit of the broom rape in it because it's not really that native on the east coast, but it was there for a while. Now the house has been completely redone recently, so I don't know whether it's gone. So I'll have to check next year to see it gone, which would be a shame if it has gone. But an interesting find. Um, Amazing what you can find in housing estates. Now this was an amazing find. This is green-flowered Helleborine. This map's a bit out of date, but you can see on the east coast there's no records at all. And this turned up on the banks of the River Tees in Stockton. And it was like a 30-meter stretch, literally at the side of the path, and within 8, 9 feet of the River Tees. And I've no idea how that's got there. Because there's no records in BC 66, which is the other side of the river, and there's no records in 62 either. So where's it come from? It must have been very, very small seeds blown from somewhere. But yeah, what a find. And that was actually found by a bird watcher who got into plants during lockdown because he got bored because he couldn't go out. So he started looking at plants. And because he's got such a good eye for things, he was very, very good at finding unusual stuff. So that was a fantastic find, really. And the moonwort on the left, I was quite surprised to find this on that huge brownfield site that I mentioned earlier. Not just one or two or a few, but thousands of them on this brownfield site. I've never seen so many. And if you can look around it, there's no grass there. It's moss and lichen, and they just absolutely loved it. I found out later that moonwort does sometimes turn up on brownfield sites. I think it's happened in Scotland a few times. So that's definitely one worth a look for. But I had never seen it before on a brownfield site, but I was amazed, really, the numbers. It tends to get nibbled by the rabbits, unfortunately. Um, I was out with a nature group the other day. This is very recent, and I found this nettle, and it looked a bit odd because it had very long leaves, very elongated, and I thought, oh, that's a bit strange. And I knew about this subspecies that of nettle, and I was very brave and I actually touched it, and there's no stings with it. So you could pick it and it doesn't sting you, which seemed rather odd. But when you look at it under a hand lens, it's still got the what look like the stinging hairs, only not as many on the surface of the leaf. But when you touch it, it doesn't sting you. So it's quite strange, really. But again, not very widespread, certainly in the north of England. But I think it's probably very under-recorded because people just don't want to go and touching nettle. So, but that was an interesting find. And, obviously with brownfields, whoops, going back a bit, with brownfield sites, you get some problem plants. In the River Tees, we've got giant hogweed, which is a bit of a menace, really. And the council do try and knock it back, but it's quite difficult to keep on top of. It's a magnificent plant, but it's just a bit on the nasty side, especially if you touch it. Japanese knotweed everywhere. There are some places that I wonder how the plants got into the place that it's in, particularly as it usually gets spread by little bits of weed, the roots and stuff. And one or two places I found it, I was thinking, how the heck it's got there? But again, it tends to be on brownfield sites that because if you definitely don't want it in your garden. Himalayan balsam, again, another nuisance plant. People try and pull it out and try and get rid of it, but it's quite difficult to eradicate once it's in. And in Teesside, we have a lot of problem with Michaelmas daisy. They are attractive, but it spreads like mad and covers big areas if given half a chance. So, that's the sort of problems we've got. And this lot, the water plants are even worse. New Zealand pygmy weed is a menace and really difficult to eradicate once it's got in the water course. It really is a problem. This one's a problem we've got in one of the places, Coulton Marsh. This floating pennywort tends to cover the whole of the surface of the water, and kills a lot of the other plants off underneath, and becomes a real problem. And again, you can't spray them. So, and even if you pull them out, even a little bit that gets left behind will grow into a new plant. So they are water plants that get going are a menace. We don't have in our area so much of a problem with rhododendron. They tend to have that more of a problem in the west and the wetter areas than we have, but we still have some. Again, quite a difficult one to get rid of because you need to cut it and sometimes burn it to stop it. So yeah, but on the whole, we haven't got so many problem ones in my area. Um, so just to sort of conclude, really, I just try and encourage people to use the new BSBI app for recording when you're out. So it's so easy. It makes my life so much easier now. You just have it on your phone and just record the plants. And the old system where we used to use a MapMate, a database. So I would record the plants on a piece of paper, add it to a database, MapMate database, and then check those and then upload it to the BSBI database. Whereas this is so much more convenient. You've got it in your phone, you carry it around, so that when you come across a plant, it automatically puts the grid reference in. You just need the name of the place where you are and your name and so on. And that's it. It's easy enough. And you don't even have to save it as you're going along. It does it automatically. And the records from my county come to me. So it's brilliant. So I can just easily check it and just put it on the database. And it's the same with iRecord and iNaturalist. I much prefer the app to these two. iNaturalist suffers from people putting silly names in because if I was to put a plant on the BSBI database, I want a name next to it of a proper person. But people who should know better, including some ecologists, put themselves down as Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and things like that, which I can't really add, which seems a real shame because they're adding the records. But why they do that, I have no idea. iRecord tends not to have that so much of a problem, but iNaturalist is riddled with it, unfortunately. But I have to try and check through those as well. And a bit of identification help. One or two things you might not know about. I don't know if you know about the Basil project. Richard Mabbott started it because he got confused with lots of plant rosettes, especially when things weren't in flower, and he started taking photographs of them. And then Tim Rich encouraged him to make a database of all the ones that he found, and people have added photos to it. So he's got like a database of plants growing early on in the season, because often they are quite confusing. When especially you've got early leaves, you're not quite sure what you've got. So that does help. And there's a lot these days. There's a lot more stuff on the BSBI website for ID help than it used to be. It's really quite good now. And of course, you've got older websites like Wildflower Finder, which has got some nice, very good close-up images of things, which is quite good for ID. And again, there's lots of other online sites and apps as well. The apps are getting better. The one I tend to use is OBS Identify, and sometimes use Google Lens, which is quite good. If you've got a reasonable botany knowledge, they can be quite useful sometimes when haven't got a clue what it is you're looking at. So sometimes it gets you to the right genus. So it gives you an idea of what you're doing. Particularly useful if you're abroad when you get stuck and you don't know what something is. I also use the plant atlas as well. Sometimes when I'm out, even when I'm out in the field, where I've got it on online, where you can check things of where things are, which is quite useful. And right, so urban bot is just fun, really. Just go out there and do it, and take a ruler with you, measure it. That's the one with the ruler is Sternianus cotoneaster, showing that it's quite big leaves on it, really. So it's that one's read the book. It knows that it should have quite long leaves. and the plant in the bottom in the middle is sea buckthorn coming up through tarmac. It just shows the power of some of these plants. So you never know what you're going to find. There's several new books out. Things there's this one by Trevor Dines. You can see that on urban plants, and there's several other things. So, you know, as Janet said, I think it is the maybe the in thing at the moment. But yeah, so if you're out and about, keep doing the records, keep sending things in, and you know, we never know what we might find. And that's it basically. So hope you enjoyed that.